All right, hi friends. Welcome to a Yin Yoga practice. Be sure to grab some props and gather them up. Take a moment to pause the video so that you can gather a blanket or a yoga towel, whatever you've got, a pillow to perhaps elevate the hips or cushion under the body in some way. And then if you don't have traditional yoga blocks, anything that brings the floor to you. So it could be a pot or a pan, it could be a couple of books, whatever you've got around the house. All right, let's take a moment to settle in a brief meditation and finding a comfortable position for your body. And this could be seated or lying down. And just a few moments to really tune into the body and to begin this practice in the art of listening. And you might notice that as the eyes close or just become a bit softer, that you become more aware of sounds within your practice space. And perhaps they're pulling your attention in that direction, and that's okay. It's just your awareness of your auditory sense. And see if you can begin to listen to the body in terms of scanning and noticing areas that might feel like there's tension, areas that might feel more at ease, or even just a disconnection to a part of the body. And though in our practice our bodies might appear to be quite still, we might begin to feel ourselves listening to the energetic system of the body. It might be that opportunity to listen to the mind. Is it full of chatter, continuing on and on? Are there long pauses between the thoughts? And I invite you, as we move through our practice, to continue to listen to all of these components, and so that we might begin to cultivate yin qualities of mind, even when we might feel yang sensation within the body or a yang reaction within the mind. And can we meet it all with a bit more kindness and compassion, or just an open receptivity? And let's take the next few minutes in silence, just practicing this art of listening, of slowing down, and just a pause within our day. And then taking a moment to discern or decide if there's another affirmation or a dedication that you have to your practice. You might just place that in the forefront of the mind and have it as something to return to within your practice, or to begin to hone into and cultivate over this time of practice. All right, let's begin. Okay, if you were lying down or in a seat on the heels, just take a moment to make your way up to a seated position with the legs out in front. And so you might decide in some of our seated postures to have the hips elevated. I find that to be quite helpful in many of the postures. So from here we're going to come into butterfly. And Yin Yoga is a practice where it's a more tissue-specific practice. We're intending and aiming to apply stresses to the denser connective tissues of our body. So this includes our fascia, our ligaments, and our tendons, and the joint capsules of the body. So in this first posture, we're aiming to feel some sensation within the inner thighs. This might be down the whole inner line of the leg or deeper into the groin. And as we start to explore arrangement of our torso, we might also start to explore sliding the heels closer to the body or further away. You could even use those blocks or books or blankets to place underneath the outer hips if you're feeling too much sensation within the inner thighs. And if you have been advised to not round through the spine, you could certainly bring the spine to a more neutral position as you tilt the pelvis forward in space. You could opt to slowly start to round the spine forward. And just begin to practice allowing gravity to really do the work here. And so if you find that the downward pull of this upper body moving down in space is just lending to too much sensation, whether it's in the spine, the neck, and to the hips, you might decide to just ease your way back a bit and start to use props strategically to stop your body in space. And that might mean a block resting on the feet to rest the forehead upon. It might mean several props to support the upper body. And so getting curious about the sensation felt within those target areas, knowing that you might feel them in all those places or just one. And getting curious about how your body feels within the posture based on how you choose to set up your positioning of the legs, of the upper body, and how that starts to affect sensation system-wide. And so once you find yourself at that first edge of resistance, it might be felt as a tug, a broad area of sensation. Begin to relax into the body. So relaxing the muscles where you feel sensation. And in our Yin Yoga practice, there's 3 main ways that we approach each posture. We find an alignment that supports targeting one or all of those specific areas. And then we start to soften and just let the weight of our body and gravity assist in this stress. And we hold postures anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes. So as I had mentioned before, this is a more tissue-specific exercise practice, you could call it. One that's complementary to other practices that are more rhythmic and start to exercise the body cardiovascularly, muscularly. So we'll be here for about 1 more minute. And so as you're holding a posture, you might find yourself exploring several target areas over time, and several edges based upon the feedback that the body is giving you. And so as you're holding in a posture, if you notice any numbness or tingling, any sharp sensation, those are all signs to back off, to either find yourself at a milder edge or just to release from the posture completely and to just wait until the next pose is called. Okay, let's slowly, gradually begin to bring the spine upright. And as we start to ease out of this posture, noticing any sense of fragility felt within those areas that we were experiencing sensation. Just know that that's a normal sensation to feel. From here, we're just going to immediately shift into our dragonfly by straightening into the knees and beginning to explore moving the legs away from one another. And you might explore moving to that end range of motion, or you might start to get curious and notice, what does it feel like if I don't move all the way out and just start to pay attention to what I'm feeling within the inner lines of the legs or the backs of the knees. And if keeping the knees completely straight really just doesn't suit the body, you might have a bend into the knees and place a couple of small pillows or folded blankets underneath the knees. And then just let the legs become soft. And along with these target areas, as we bring the upper body forward, we might then again start to round through the spine here. And the arms might be resting upon the legs. You might create a little shelf for the elbows to rest out in front of you. You could cradle the head by propping the elbows and then using the hands to support the head here in space. So playing with these different variations that allow you to just, again, slow down, to explore the edge of sensation that's felt here. And then again to listen. And you might find that the body just, or the attention starts to rest upon sensation within the body. And as we hold within these postures, you could explore keeping the breath natural. In some postures, you might have a more controlled and focused breath. And with the spine in flexion again, just noticing if there's still some residual tension lingering along the spine, along the back of the neck or the head. And in some postures, it might be feeling like you're stretching and stressing into the muscles. And so though we're aiming to target the dense connective tissues of the body, it is really important to note that the fascia is everywhere within the body. It's found at different depths and layers. And it coalesces to help connect the muscle to bone and the bone to bone as well, becoming a bit more dense and stronger at those connection points. I'll be here for about a minute longer. And though the fascia is a bit more elastic than the ligaments and the tendons, they're still essentially made up of the same material. And so this practice is supported by the theory of exercise, that in order for tissues to maintain their health and vitality, they need to have some level of stress, and then those moments of rest as well. And if we were to force our body quickly into these postures, these tissues would tense up to support and protect us. And that's why we enter postures slowly and gradually, really paying attention to that feeling of stress and resistance within the body. And as we hold over time, we might start to observe that it makes sense to explore a different edge, because some of that tension has given out within that tissue itself. Okay, so from here we're slowly going to start to rise up from our fold. And then gradually begin to take your time to bring the legs towards one another. You might use your hands to assist. And as the legs get closer towards one another, it might feel nice just to pulse through the knees a few times. I often like to bring my hands back behind me, to place my feet on the floor, and just windshield wiper the legs from side to side a few times, using a little bit of movement to slowly ease out of the posture. Okay, so from here, we're going to start to move towards a posture called cattail. So I'm just going to pretend that I'm with you all here. So I'm facing towards the front of my mat now, and we're just going to turn to face the back of the mat on our left hand side. So kind of sitting sideways on your mat, and you might bring the knees kind of more or less to stack here, and then that left palm will just be on the floor, so I'm not mirroring you here in this posture. And then we're going to slowly start to lower that left forearm down towards the floor. And so in this posture, we're aiming to feel some sensation through that left waist. And from here, start to bring this top right leg down in front of you. And if you find that it doesn't rest comfortably on the floor, if there's too much sensation through the outer hips, you could place something underneath that knee. Now, if you're feeling too much through the side waist, you could use a pillow underneath your body. You could opt to slide down onto your tricep and to support underneath the left side of the face. And then I'm going to take another variation within this where I'm going to slide my left leg back a bit in space, reaching back with my right hand for the top of my left foot. And so though we relax into several of target areas that might be felt, we could stay engaged into this left shoulder or start to relax into it. I enjoy resting my ear towards my shoulder and just finding kind of this loungy, like approach as I relax into the sensation. And so you can explore drawing that left thigh back a bit more in space, perhaps feeling now sensation into the quadricep, the front of the knee, or across that right shoulder. And depending on mobility of the spine, the amount of tension within the rib cage itself, the mobility of the ribs too will determine what your side bend will look like in your body. And as you rest here, you might start to prop your left forearm up onto a block, just giving a bit more emphasis to the side body if that feels appropriate. So again, we're still just trying to find and maintain a mild to moderate level of sensation within each of these postures. And to put it more simply, if we were to place this on a scale from 0 to 10, 0 being no sensation, 10 being in excruciating pain, ideally over the hold of the whole pose, we would like to simmer between a 2 and a 5 on that sensation scale. And sometimes when we play with different variations within the posture, or we find that sensation starts to diminish and we start to increase our range of motion, we might find at first that it bumps right up to that level 5, and you can explore challenging that edge of resistance by pausing and listening and noticing how the body starts to respond. And this might be found within the mind. If you feel clenching within the muscles, just signs to back off to that milder edge. And we'll be here for about 1 more minute. Right, so from here we're just going to slowly start to release and rest in a fetal position on our left hand side. And you might use that bottom arm to cradle underneath the head. And then just feel the body start to release from your cattail. Attuning to any lingering sensation that might be felt within those target areas. Attuning to how the energy may have shifted from the release of the posture. And using that top right hand, let's push up towards our seated position. And we'll start to bring a little bit of focus into the hips. So, a couple options here. We're going to make our way into some variation of shoelace pose. And our intended target area within this posture is going to be the outer hips. So again, I'm not going to be mirroring you here, but one option is to come into just a more open variation of a shoelace where the right shin is going to be crossed in front of the left. And so your feet might be more or less kind of underneath the knees or so. There might be a little bit of space between them. And if this feels like this is enough sensation, stay here. You might start to explore other variations where you start to stack your knees here or your shins. And this is more of a square-like posture, but it's still targeting the outer hips like we do within our shoelace pose. And some may find that they're still really not feeling much here. So they could explore starting to draw the thighs closer towards one another. So that left heel is moving towards the right outer hip and the right foot is moving towards the left side. And you might find that the knees are more or less stacked or so. And again, playing with the height of the hips here up on a prop might make some more space and freedom for those femur bones to move within the hip sockets. So one option here in our shoelace might be that this right foot is just on the floor and the right knee is pointed up towards the sky. Or it might be kind of like this. And as we start to move through variations, we might find that we have a little bit more movement, like when I come forward, this right knee just naturally comes down towards the floor. But we don't want any pain within the knee joint, so really just pay attention to what variation feels sustainable within your body without pain, numbness, sharp sensation. Okay, so we're going to take 3 different variations in this posture. First, we're going to come into a twist. So bringing your right hand back behind you, start to reach your left hand over towards your right knee or your shin, and just gradually start to twist over to your right. And so there's this bit of an element of a yang component for our upper body here. So there might be mild engagement into the core, but see if you can still relax within the hips themselves. Just sensing the connection to the floor and how bringing a twist into the body might change sensation of where we're feeling it in the hips themselves. And perhaps it's now the top of the left leg, across the abdomen, all right, let's slowly start to unwind. And then take the arms out really nice and wide, spread through the fingertips. And then as you exhale, give yourself a big hug. So drawing your right arm underneath your left and start to reach for opposite shoulders. So you could stay just as is. You might play with your eagle wrap of your arms by spinning your forearms towards one another. But if you find that you can't keep a connection to the elbow points here, you might just stay right here. Or you might hug your right knee or right arm across your body here. So right's under left. No, left arm across the body. All right. And then you can stay here, or you can start to add in a little bit of a fold here. And just letting the arms be heavy. And starting to feel sensation either between the shoulder blades or down the outer line of the arms. And depending on how the hips are feeling, you might start to release the forearms down to the legs or the tops of the knees. You could build a little bit of a tower for the forearms to rest upon as well. All right, and then slowly just unthread the arms and continue to explore your depth of a forward fold here. Either reaching the arms to the support of something out in front of you. Others may find it more approachable to just release the palms to the floor, or the forearms all the way to the floor. And just observing your experience here. Not seeking out anything per se, but just noticing how sensation might cause reactivity within the mind. And this reactivity can either be one of satisfaction or dissatisfaction. And you can just become more aware of our reactive patterns that might be brought about from sensation in the body, or memories that start to arise in the mind, or even anticipation for something in the future. About a minute left here. Start to lift up out of our fold. And then just slowly start to ease those legs out in front of you. Any movement here is invited, or you can just rest in stillness and notice what it feels like to just let be as we relax and release from the posture. So then we'll set up to take our cattail on the other side. So coming to sit sideways on your mat, resting onto your right hip side, and slowly exploring releasing your right forearm down to the floor. Just being sure to pad underneath that right outer hip if touching the floor isn't comfortable. And so as we start to observe how we are feeling within this right side body, just play with engagement and relaxing. And starting to explore drawing that bottom right leg back behind you and noticing sensation of that top left outer hip. You might walk that right elbow a little further away from the body or support it with a blanket. And perhaps the right shoulder releases, or the right ear releases to the right shoulder. And then lastly, it might feel appropriate to reach back for that right foot with your left hand. And if there's a lot of space between the foot and the hand, you could use a belt, a strap, a dog leash, whatever you've got. But know that you could just omit that part of the variation of that posture. And so when we take these postures that are asymmetrical, we might start to observe differences that we feel from side to side. We tend to be stronger on one side than the other, dominant, less dominant. And that can show up in tension patterns of the body, or there might just be an asymmetry within our skeletal structure, something that's totally normal. But it's in this act of slowing down, of paying attention within these postures, that we start to gain the wisdom and the insight of these little discrepancies that we feel from side to side, how that shifts and changes over the course of our practice, and how it might start to change over time as well. And so as we move further and further within our practice, I'm just going to talk less and less during the hold of the pose. I find that that's a really wonderful opportunity to continue to explore gaining wisdom and insight on the body and the mind and the heart. About a minute left here. And so I came to find Yin Yoga long after I had started my Yang Yoga practice. And it was one of those aha moments of, oh my gosh, this was the practice that was missing after all these years. I was always pushing and striving and going and do. And this is one of my go-to practices. Sometimes I pair it up with a practice in the morning that's more vigorous, or a long walk or a hike, and then do it before I go off to bed. But I've really found great value in the opportunity to just slow down and really tend to the body. All right, let's gradually start to release from this posture, coming to rest in that side-lying position on our right-hand side, moving props away so that the body can just rest on the floor. And so I mention all of that about the aha moment of this practice because there were times that I noticed it was deeply ingrained to engage within the body, especially when I was doing forward folds. And so I would find that it would be very challenging to hold postures for a long period of time. And I would also notice I would be very sore for several days after the practice. And now that I've really listened to not pushing too far in a pose and really relaxing into it, that I'm not sore afterwards. So if you notice that that starts to happen within your practice, just use that as feedback that perhaps you went too deep within a pose, or that you were muscularly engaging without even knowing it. And just tuning in to any lingering sensations from your cattail, side body, the hips, the shoulders. Alright, let's ease our way up to seat. And I'm just gonna grab my little pillow to elevate my hips here. So we'll again set up for our shoelace. This time the left shin comes in front of the right, whether the knees are further away from one another or the shins are in a more stacked-like position, or the thighs are moving towards one another. Again, this might be the same setup or different based on how this side feels. Excuse me. All right, so we'll come into our twist here. So our left hand back behind us, twisting to the right. Place that right hand wherever it feels comfortable on that left leg. And you might gaze off the left shoulder or try gazing down towards the knees instead. How does this feel for the neck? And then just slowly starting to unwind, spread those arms out really nice and wide, and then start to draw your left arm underneath the right. So again, those same options. You can just hold onto opposite shoulder, spin your forearms and the backs of the hands, or double wrap the arms, or you can just draw that top arm across the body. And you might just gently round a bit through the upper back, letting the shoulders get heavy, the head. And though if you prefer to be more upright, that's okay as well. Just getting curious about sensation within the shoulders and down into the hips. You might lower those elbows down towards the tops of the thighs, or utilize those props for the body here. All right, and then just releasing the arms down in front of you, and we'll pause in your depth of folding over the legs. That works for the outer hips. let's ease our way out of this posture, uncrossing the legs, and then making your way into your downward facing dog. Sending those hips up and back. You might move a little bit in your down dog, bending and straightening into one leg. Swaying the hips a bit from side to side. And then just feeling those knees begin to come towards a straight position. Just releasing through the whole back line of the body. All right, and then we'll start to make our way into our dragon here. So releasing down onto the knees. I'm just going to get myself set up here so that you can see the right side of my body first, because we're going to start with the right side. So bringing your right hand a little closer to your left, and then just stepping your left foot out nice and wide, coming into our inside dragon. So if you find that the left hip is just directly over that left knee, you might not feel very much, or if anything at all, in our intended target areas. So this might just require sliding that left leg back a little bit in space. Can be a little, a lot. Just again, pay attention to what you're feeling. I like to have my hands on blocks here. And so target areas here include the top of the left thigh, inner right thigh, back of the right leg, maybe the right outer hip. And if you're feeling some compression or pinching in that right hip crease, you might have to explore working around that compression. Try taking the right leg out a bit wider, or dial your right toes out a bit to the side. And if there's a lot of pressure on the top of that left knee, you might roll up a blanket several times and just place it underneath the shin right behind the knee so that the knee is elevated up off of the floor. And then do what you will with the upper body that allows you to find some amount of ease within this spicier pose. So the torso might be more upright. You might walk your hands further away, releasing your forearms down to blocks or the floor. Again, noticing if you're feeling that call of dissatisfaction of the pose. How is your mind reacting and responding? Are you gripping within the face or the belly? Less than a minute here. Okay, and then from here we're just going to start to shift into our runner's dragon or gecko. So shifting the hips back, straightening into the right leg. And that right leg might stay out wide. You might frame that leg with your hands. Again, hands could be on blocks or down to the floor. Your toes might lift up and point up towards the sky, just observing what's felt along the back of the leg. You could also come into gecko, where you slide that right leg further away from your body. And in either one of these variations, you might be folded over that right leg a bit. Some people are able to move into full splits, so if that's accessible within your body, if it feels appropriate for the level of sensation, just resting into that. Less than a minute here. Right, and just gradually rebend into the right knee and then step it back behind you for your tabletop position. And you might counter with a downward facing dog for a moment here, or shift your hips towards your heels in your child's pose. All right, and from here we'll start to bring focus into the shoulders before we take our dragon to the other side. I know you were really hoping we'd go right into it right away. So we're going to come into a posture called Anahatasana, or heart-melting pose. So I like to start with my hips about right over the knees and start to walk the hands forward in space. So far forward that you find perhaps the forearms are able to release to the floor. Maybe even the forehead. You can always bring the floor to you, though, to make a connection so that the upper body can ease down. And if you're feeling too much sensation within the shoulders, you could explore taking the arms wider or closer together, or simply just shifting your hips further back in space. So we want some amount of sensation to be felt through either the armpit region or the borders of the shoulder along the outside edge. This might be felt down the backs of the arms, across the front of the spine, or perhaps middle of the back, or even into the belly or the low back. And if you're someone that has a lot of movement available within the shoulders, you could bring the hands or the forearms up to blocks if that sensation just isn't felt here, has diminished a bit. About a minute left here. All right, and then lifting the head, shifting the shoulders slightly over the elbows, taking the knees out just a little bit wider, and then shifting the body back in space. And you can either stack the palms and rest the forehead here, releasing through the shoulders. Others might tuck the elbows to the outsides of the knees, or even reach the arms back behind you towards the heels. All right, and then rising back up to our hands and knees so that we can take our dragon to the other side. Bringing that left hand a little closer to your right hand, and then just stepping that left foot out really nice and wide. And that might mean that the left leg is closer towards the body or out further away. Try sliding that right leg back so that you can feel ample sensation across the front of that right thigh. And then just settle in here. Playing with the angle of your torso here in space, whether you're more lifted and upright or you're releasing down onto the forearms. And just listening to how sensation shows up on this side of your body in this shape. No judgment or ranking here, but really just a deeper awareness for your body. Just a few more breaths here on this side in this variation. And then from here, shifting into either your geckos or runners. So either shifting the hips back and straightening into that left leg, or sending that left leg forward in space. I find that taking the gecko variation still brings that bit of height and sensitivity to the front of that right hip. Or I should say the back leg still has quite a bit of spiciness there. And sometimes I play when I'm folding over that extended front leg, just tilting the head up or down and just becoming aware of how connected our fascia is. That movement in the head can be felt all the way down the back of the spine and the back of the leg. And just opening up our awareness to how interconnected our body is through this sheath-like material that surrounds our muscles, supports our organs, and wraps our bones. Okay, let's slowly start to step it back to that tabletop position. Lift up and back to your downward facing dog one more time here. And then slowly starting to release down onto your belly from here. placing the hands and the head wherever it feels best for the upper body. Letting the legs get heavy here in space. All right, so from here we're going to come into a posture called open wing. And we're just aiming to stimulate the front of the shoulder. So we'll outstretch our right palm away from the body. And you can have it at different angles. It could be up higher than the shoulder, down at shoulder height, down even lower. You could also have the palm flipped up towards the ceiling. Gaze should be towards the left shoulder. And you press your left palm underneath the left shoulder, slowly roll onto the right side of the body. A couple leg variations here that you could take. Legs could just be stacked one on top of the other. You could bend your knees and stack them out in front of the pelvis. You could have your top left knee pointing up to the sky, but again, that's shifting the body back in space and creating more stimulation across the front of the shoulder, and that might not feel appropriate right away. Other variations can include keeping the top knee bent and up towards the ceiling and that bottom leg straight. You could also send that left arm behind the back, the top one, and just drape it behind you. And if there's any discomfort within the neck, it might feel more suitable to place a blanket, a pillow, or even a block underneath this right side of the face. And so you might feel it further down the arm, into the bicep or the elbow, across the chest, into the pectorals, across the sternum. And then depending on how the left arm is, just some stimulation there as well. Let's slowly start to release and roll towards the belly again. You might leave that right arm outstretched for a moment, or just rebend into the elbow, stacking the palms, or just slide that right arm down beside the body. Releasing, recollecting. receiving and reflecting. And this deep listening, this deep wisdom for ourselves, for our bodies, and for our heart and mind. All right, let's set up for our open wing on the other side. Outstretching the left palm, rolling onto the left side of the body as you gaze to the right. And just noticing how this side feels. It could be quite different. Might need a different setup, a different arrangement for the body. If that right arm is behind the back, you might feel a slight pinching between the shoulder blades. And so in this silence, there is space. And that space to pause and to listen, to deepen our awareness to what is, to who we are. About a minute left here. And slowly start to release. Rolling towards the belly again. And then easing your way over onto your back, setting up for your Shavasana. You might cover up with that blanket or towel that you have. You might bring a couple pillows behind the thighs or the knees. the body take up some space and feel it just soften towards the floor, or even just allow it to do so. Feel your connection to whatever is beneath you, and sensing the body slowly getting heavier. Notice what is present right now. Any shift that might have occurred during our practice. Inviting it all in, letting be through this deep listening. And start to move into the body again. You might take a few deep breaths. Spread through the fingers and the toes, and then start to wiggle into them. Stretch long if that feels good. And bring the knees into the chest. And slowly roll over to one side. And gradually ease your way up to a seated position. And closing out here in this upright position, hands at heart center. I thank you so much for sharing your time, for sharing your practice, and I hope you find deep value in this slowing down, in this listening, and tuning into our wisdom and into our hearts. Thank you, thank you.